Hello friends, let us talk about the interaction framework. Now, interaction framework attempts a more realistic description for interaction by including the system explicitly, and it later breaks into the four components. It's like system, the user, the input and output, and each component has its own language. So there's an arrow. The general interaction system is given, then that there's a system and the user. The system is on the left hand side and the user is on right hand side, and given below the output and the input. So a system sits between the user as interface, as the interface is reacted between the user and system. So there are four steps in interactive cycle, each corresponding to the translations. So that means the user begins interactive cycle with the formulation, with the thinking of accomplishing a goal and a task to achieve that goal. So there's the only way that user can manipulate the machine is through the input and output. So the task that must be articulated with the input language, and then the input language is translated into the code language. And so how does it work as the operation by the to be which is to be performed by the system, and then the system transforms itself as the described as the operations. So the tasks are response of the users and they need to be translated to the stimuli for the input. Now the execution phase, the system which is in the new state and which must now communicate to the user. That means the current value of the system attribute and are rendered at the concept or the features of the output. So the user formulation of the desired task which is to be achieved through some goal needs to be implemented in the input language, and the tasks are responses of the user and they need not to be translated for the input. So the task responses of the user and they are not translated, that means the input is to be stimuli. So user formulation, that means the user manipulation of the desired task which is to be goal achieved is not articulated, which is not in the input language. The tasks are responses, the tasks that are responses or the task responses for the users need to be translated with the help of the input, and user must interpret the output to evaluate what has happened or whether it has given us the correct values or not. So task is phrased in terms of certain psychological attribute that performs some highlighted domains, features of the domains of the users. If this task, if the psychological tasks are are attributes that not to be mapped, which are mapped according to the input language, and the articulations of the task will be much simpler. So example like a poor mapping as a pointed device in a large room. If you cannot see the mapping of the device or the pointing device to the system, that means it's a poorly performed task and so on. So the input must interpret the output to evaluate that what has happened, and the responses from the output is translated to stimuli for the assessment that output has generated, and the result is given below. So the input of the responses of the input are translated to stimuli. Then it the ease with the ease in the convenient manner which the translation from input to the system takes place is a less importance because the effort is not so expended by the user. So one state transition, that means it is like a state transition or state machine chart which I've studied earlier. So when a system changes your state from one state to another state, the execution phase of the interaction is completed and the evaluation phase begin. So how you evaluate the system, the new state of the system must be communicated to the user, and so this is communication through the output components, maybe the screen, maybe the speaker and so on, with the help of graphs in the interface system. The ability, that means to capture the domain concepts of the system within the output, is the questions of the translations. So this is about the framework. Next we'll study about the ergonomics. Till then, bye.